Okay, so we're going through the Sandbag or natural or Atlas stone holds, depending on which piece of equipment you have available. And basically, this is just an exercise that cues internal torque and strengthens the entire body, but particularly emphasizes the posterior chain over a longer range of motion than we would typically get. Now, when we tend to take a joint into a larger range of motion, it inherently loses a little bit of stability. However, with the Sandbag or the stone holds, because you generate something known as internal torque, it also solidifies that structural position. So what do I mean by that? Well, as you can see, when I'm set up in the position that we need to assume, which is feet approximately shoulder width apart, the closer you can get to shoulder width for the competitive scenario, the higher you're going to be able to displace the Sandbag or the stone. Plus, it just tends to, like I said, assume a little bit of a better structural position. So all we're going to do is wrap our hands underneath the implement, okay? Now, as you can see here, I'm actually minimizing the knee flexion angle, and I'm focusing on tightening up my posterior chain. Again, a mistake that a lot of people make, particularly if you're new to this movement, is to try and squat the weight up. But that squatting, okay, actually increases the distance of the weight from your hip joint. Just in a horizontal plane, it increases that distance, which actually increases the stress on your lower back. So you want your hips to be as high as you possibly can be, whilst keeping them as close to the implement as possible. From here, as you can see, before I lift, I create that internal torque. So if we really focus on the video for a second, you can see here that my foot, I will drive my toes into the ground. So a lot of the time with a lot of movements, we talk about external torque, we talk about screwing the floor and pushing outwards, okay? And whilst I am doing that, I'm also emphasizing internal torque, which is creating pressure inwards towards the midline of the body. You can then see that with my hands from the shoulder joints and not from the elbow joint, from the shoulder joints, I'm creating internal torque by crushing my hands together. The way I cue people to use this is to focus on pressing their wrists together in that kind of flying motion, focusing on activating the pecs and the lats to internally rotate the shoulder slightly, just to create, again, that solid structural position. From here, all we're going to do is drive through the heels, okay? A lot of people, again, make the mistake of using their arms. Drive through the heels and break the weight off the ground. When you're in this bottom position, okay, you'll notice that it is a much longer range of motion than you would typically have within a deadlift. There is much more flexion, but you'll notice if you do this movement correctly and if you activate internal torque, you shouldn't feel any activation in your lower back. It should primarily be throughout your whole posterior chain, evenly balanced with a particular emphasis on your hamstrings and glutes. You're going to hold it for the allotted time and then slowly relax it to the ground. Now for the top position, you're going to do the same as you did earlier, same setup, but you're going to take it to the lap, okay? In which case you just literally deadlift the weight off the ground from that bottom position and then squat down and rest the implement on your thighs. The closer you can get that implement to your chest, not to your stomach, to your chest, the higher you're going to displace it and the easier it's going to be on your breathing mechanics when you get to the top position. You're going to wrap your arms around the implement. Again, most people will assume that going under will give them more structural support, but again, that places too much stress on the biceps and mitigates that internal torque. So you want to keep your arms either at 90 degrees out to the side or slightly over. And then again, crush inwards towards the midline of the body, activate those strong internal rotators of the shoulders and the muscles that control your thoracic position, such as your lats, to create that solid position. And then from here, pulling the weight in towards your chest, you're going to stand up. Now, there's two ways you can hold this top position. Number one, for pure force and structural mechanics, I like to just stand up with the weight, create extension at the hip, a little bit of over extension, just to balance that weight over the midline of the foot in terms of center of mass. However, you can also, if you're in a competitive situation, you can go into triple extension and hold the top triple extended position. The only reason I like to rotate between the two is when you're relying exclusively on your balance in extreme plantar flexion, it can sometimes reduce the weight that you can hold in that structural position. So you want to make sure that there's that trade-off between how much weight you can lift and hold and how much weight you can balance. Again, all the way through this, the cue is internal torque. So the cue is to create that crushing strength towards the midline in order to keep that stable position within each joint.